Heat GM Andy Elisburg shared his thoughts on Miami's quiet offseason, adding Terry Rozier, but did he potentially drive another wedge between the team and Jimmy Butler?
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. In an interview with SiriusXM, Heat general manager Andy Elisburg talked about Jimmy Butler's future and why he didn't get an extension this summer. He then revealed the real reason why the Heat haven't made a free agent move this summer. Take a listen to these two snippets from the interview. We're going to play both of them. The first part is about Jimmy. The second part is about free agency. And then we're just going to talk about all of this after. So here's the sound.
You know, as Pat said in, I think, this press conference, and look, you're not, it doesn't have to be something you do now. You have an opportunity to do this all year long. So there's an opportunity to do it at some point in time. And then there's an opportunity, if he becomes a free agent next year, sit down and do a contract at that point in time. So there's always an opportunity to do it. If a player wants to be in Miami and we want him in Miami, the rest of it is logistics. I think Jimmy's indicated he wants to be in Miami, and we've indicated we like Jimmy and want to be in Miami. Pat has indicated in his postseason press conference that there are things he wants to see, and there's challenges he wants to go. Jimmy's not one who is familiar with having challenges and being part of being challenged, and Pat and Jimmy are two very strong-willed people who are looking for the same thing, which is ultimately to win. My view of it, at the end of the day, it will work itself out. There are lots of different ways it can work out, but first and foremost, the most important thing is, do the player and the team want to be continuing to work together? And I think we still have a chance to be in the mix of it. You know, we're continuing to try to find ways to improve the team. Our free agent move really this year was really the Terry move. That was really the move that we did at that point in time that was going to put, you know, we just decided to do early. Probably took us out of really being able to do some of the mid-level and sign and trades issues because of the apron rules that, you know, sort of prevent that, which you knew when you made the move that you were going to probably do this versus the other.
So a lot to get to there. He talked a lot about basically the Terry Rozier trade in January, basically being their free agent move this summer. We will talk about that a little bit later, but he also referred back to Pat Riley's comments in his end-of-season presser about wanting Jimmy Butler to be more available, and pretty much says in no uncertain terms that Pat Riley is challenging Jimmy Butler directly this season, and that's the reason why Jimmy Butler does not have an extension. And that, to me, is sort of the part that stands out to me. Mm-hmm. It worked. Pat Riley challenged openly his star player in a way that he challenged LeBron, and it didn't work, in a way that he challenged Dwayne Wade, and it didn't work, and then he challenged Jimmy Butler, and he called Jimmy Butler's bluff, and it worked. And now Jimmy Butler isn't going to bother signing an extension with the Heat or any other team. He's going to go into this season with the intention of playing this year out as if it were a contract year, opting out next season, and becoming a free agent and trying to get his next big contract 12 months from now, as opposed to this summer. So that's really my takeaway here, is that Pat Riley challenged Jimmy Butler and it worked. What did you make of the sound from Andy Elisburg?
I'm trying to understand, you know, listening to the comments, reading the feedback from everybody over the last couple of days since the interview aired, and trying to understand exactly what was either so novel about what he said or inflammatory, because I'm not sure exactly how people are perceiving this or why they're perceiving this as a negative thing. Specifically, the comment that, you know, Jimmy Butler doesn't like being challenged, and I think they're completely misinterpreting it. To your point, though, I think this should be common knowledge. Like Jimmy, I'm very, very surprised to see this kind of feedback from people saying like, "Oh, what has he done? What has Pat Riley done?" Like, maybe to your point, there's like some kind of PTSD associated with LeBron in 2014 and Dwayne in 2016, where maybe you view Pat having driven them out or forced them out of the franchise or something to that effect. But I think those decisions were made regardless of what Pat Riley's done. I know it's fashionable almost to kind of turn on the front office and be like, "Oh, you let Jimmy down. You haven't made the most of the Jimmy Butler era." And as I've said many times before, they've made moves. They just didn't pay off. And I don't think anybody can be held to blame for that, because you couldn't have predicted that Kyle Lowry's aging would make him a marginal player overnight, which is basically what happened. Like, you knew it was coming, but you had hoped that maybe it would be a little bit further off, and that somewhere within that 3-year window under which he was in contract, that he was going to be, that they would have been able
like
to
we don't have to make this a whole Kyle Lowry thing, but I have said
certainly.
that first year with Kyle Lowry, that 2022 year, I know that's not the year that the Heat made the finals, but that was the best Heat team. That was the best.
Yeah,
one.
no doubt.
And if Jimmy Butler's shot goes in at the end of Game 7, maybe they beat the Warriors in the finals. That to me was always their best chance to win the championship, and that's exactly the whole point of the Kyle Lowry thing. We always knew that third year was not going to look good, and the Heat knew that too.
Right. So I think it makes perfect sense. That they've kind of laid it out. It's like, you know what, we need more from Jimmy. And it's just so funny also, like how people are kind of taking this now, but during the regular season, when we have to deal with every, recap of every game, when Jimmy is either not fully engaged or not dominating or not even out on the floor, how people go trade Jimmy's ass, get rid of Jimmy. Like, Jimmy, what's he doing? Like, when is Jimmy going to step up? And now all of a sudden in the summer, it's like, what are you doing? You've got to do what you can to keep Jimmy. You can't piss off Jimmy any further. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, if anything, that's what they should be doing. Like, I love it. I think the fact that they kind of locked eyes here and said, you know what? You want to get paid? You better show up and play your ass off. Guess what? It worked. Jimmy's like, okay. All right, I could see how he could take that and have his feelings hurt a little bit, but that's kind of what works with Jimmy. You kind of have to light a fire. You have to kind of piss him off a little bit and get the best version of him.
And by the way, yeah, it might work. If Jimmy Butler is pissed at Pat Riley, what do I care? As long as he's playing well on the floor. If I'm a fan, I don't need them to be getting dinner. I don't need them to be drinking Cabernet.
We don't care what the motivation is. It's just the end product.
Just go play better.
The means. Yeah, exactly.
You're exactly
this idea where we have to like get along. It's like, God, hate each other. Just score 30 points a game. I don't give a damn what it takes. You know what I'm saying?
Shaq and Kobe couldn't stand each other by the end of that run, and they were still winning championships.
3 championships.
I'm not trying to. So, Andy Elisburg also says that they're cut from the same cloth, and I think that has always been true. And I think that Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler share more of that cloth than Pat Riley shared with even Dwayne Wade or LeBron James or Like, to me, it's closer to like an Alonzo Mourning type of thing. And I sometimes opposites attract, and sometimes the same thing. I don't know magnets, and I don't know math, and I don't know science, and that's been well established here. But sometimes the magnets that are the same can't get close together. Yeah. Science. That's a little bit of the Pat Riley, Jimmy Butler thing. They're too similar in that, like, you can't put them in a room together by themselves, or else a fight might break out. But if this is what
Jimmy's
lights the fire under Jimmy Butler,
like, think about Jimmy's upbringing. Like, that's like not only just from being a guy from Tomball, Texas, but also being a guy who was kind of overlooked in the draft. Of having, remember, before he even signed with Miami, I think when we were discussing that summer years ago, we talked to Casey Johnson of the Chicago Tribune at the time. Yeah. And he was talking about how Jimmy's mentality and what kind of pissed him off about everybody else, and why he kind of clashed heads a little bit with Derrick Rose, was, I worked my way up from the mailroom to the CEO office, and that's what he expects of everybody on every roster, which is why he's had problems in Minnesota with guys like Wiggins and Karl-Anthony Towns, who were like immediately promoted to the CEO. Well, nobody gets more mailroom than Schenectady, New York's own Pat Riley, who, for all the Armani suits in LA and everything else, is not that guy at all. He's whiskey and cigarettes and fighting tooth and nail for everything that you've been given, and being as gritty and grimy and down in the dirt and in the mud as possible. That's Jimmy. That's Jimmy too. That's why they just
hope. I hope one day somebody describes me as just whiskey and cigarettes. That's an awesome way to be described. That's my goal by the end of my life. On my tombstone, Wes Goldberg, whiskey and cigarettes. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Whiskey and cigars, maybe a little bit more my speed. You're absolutely right. And that's the thing with Jimmy Butler, right? what didn't work in Minnesota was the high standard that Jimmy Butler has for himself and people around him. So if he was going to react in a different, that's what Pat Riley was basically doing in his end of season press conferences. Hey, that standard that we talked about last summer, you didn't reach it this year. And you could give me whatever reason. You could tell me that the regular season doesn't matter, and I was saving it for the playoffs and playoff Jimmy, and the Knicks would have been this, and the Celtics would have been that if I was this.
But you weren't there.
But you didn't do any of that, and whatever. And we're a results-based business,
Yeah.
and you didn't hit the standard that we set. And now I'm holding you accountable to that standard. And if Jimmy Butler were going to turn around and be like, well, I don't want to be held accountable to that standard. Well, he would have been doing the same thing that Karl-Anthony Towns was doing in Minnesota when Jimmy Butler was trying to hold him to that standard. And I think everybody knew that that was never going to happen for Jimmy Butler. Now, of course, the contract and the money and all that kind of stuff clouds all of the kind of different logic and things like that. But I do think it speaks to Jimmy Butler for saying, you know what? And there is a little bit more earning power next summer if he just opts out and signs as a free agent. So even that is a whole other, like, there's still some financial benefit for him not signing this extension right now, but it worked out nonetheless. At least it looks like it's worked out for now. And if what you get is essentially a contract year of a more engaged Jimmy Butler, and if this is the last great Jimmy Butler season, and if he could play 65, 70 games and score 23 points per game and be the two-way guy that he was a couple of years in the regular season and more engaged than he was this last regular season because it was not a good season for him, then that's a win. That's a win all the way around. So let's move this along. Which player did the Heat miss out on this summer because they traded for Terry Rozier in January? I've got a name. We'll talk about it next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, the views from your seat feature, and their lowest price guarantee. All that and more. That's what makes Game Time the best place to buy tickets. It takes all the guesswork out of getting seats for your favorite comedy shows, concerts, whatever you're looking for. You'll find it over at Game Time. I love their last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% on buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. Let's say you're in town. All of a sudden, a meeting ends. Maybe you're there for work, and you got a couple hours to spare. You didn't think you'd have. You know, let me go check out what's playing here. So, you know, your favorite band might be in town, or maybe a band that you're kind of interested in hearing, but you can't get tickets. Well, guess what? If you wait to the last minute, sometimes it works out better. You know what? Procrastination. Jimmy doesn't like fans showing up late in Miami. Guess what? Sometimes it pays off thanks to Game Time, and that's the place to do it. Remember, go to Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for Major League Baseball, concerts, and more at Game Time by downloading the app today. You create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA and $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can find us on your podcast app if you're in the car. You shouldn't be looking on YouTube. That's dangerous. You should be listening to the podcast version of the show, the original version of the show. So go ahead, download the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. All right. So the second part of that Andy Elisburg bit from the top of the show, he discusses how the Heat essentially punted on this offseason when they traded for Terry Rozier in January. So quickly, just some of the financials behind that. They traded Kyle Lowry's expiring contract at about $30 million. They traded that and a first-round pick to Charlotte for Rozier, who's under contract had 3 years on his contract at the time of them, make 2.5, whatever. Long term. So they basically punted on having Lowry's $30 million come off the books. And essentially, that would not have created $30 million in cap space. Let's make that clear. That's not how the salary cap works anymore. But it would have taken them under the second apron, or it would have taken them under the first apron. They're already under the second apron, but it would have taken them under the first apron. It would have actually created a full mid-level exception for them to use, which is valued at about $13 million this summer. It would have allowed them enough financial flexibility to use that and also possibly bring back Caleb Martin on the contract that he was looking for and didn't get, but the one that he was looking for. They could have done that. So they essentially swapped out that opportunity, so a mid-level guy and Caleb Martin, they chose Terry Rozier over those two guys. Now, I don't know if it was that cut and dry at the time, but that was essentially what this boils down to. And I think a lot of Heat fans are frustrated by the lack of movement and the lack of action. But and by the way, I get it. Like, you could be frustrated. I have no problem with people being frustrated. Fan how you want to fan. But the front office, and I told you this was going to happen, right? We've been talking about this before. It was only a matter of time before they struck out on all this free agent stuff. And then you heard from somebody in the front office, well, actually, Terry Rozier was our big free agent acquisition, and he was hurt by the end of the next season. So we're looking at him as our big addition going into next season. It's a little hyperbolic if we want to view it that way, because he did play 31 games for the Heat last year. It's not like he wasn't there. But that was essentially their big move. They did it in January, and because of where they are in the grand scheme of things, how close they are to the second apron, that was basically all they could do. So what they didn't anticipate maybe being an option here was DeMar DeRozan wanting to come to Miami. Now, that's where I think we can have a real debate on this. Is DeMar DeRozan already said he didn't want to take the mid-level exception, even the full mid-level exception. He ends up getting $20 million over 3 years from the Sacramento Kings, which is much higher than the mid-level exception. But you do have to wonder if that mid-level exception money was coming from Miami and not from Sacramento, if he would have been like, nah, you know what, I'll do it. And I don't even care about the taxes part of it. I'm talking about you get to play for the Heat and you don't have to play for the Sacramento Kings. No disrespect for the Sacramento Kings, but come on. So I think that might have been on the table for him more, because all they could offer him this summer was $5 million a year, and that ain't going to cut it. So who knows? Maybe that was the other part of it too. Is it would have been difficult, David. It would have been really difficult, but you could have still maybe done a couple of smaller cap saving things. Maybe you don't bring back Thomas Bryant. You don't bring back maybe even Kevin Love if he opted out. Maybe you don't bring back Caleb Martin at all. You don't bring back Haywood Highsmith. It would have been difficult, but you could have created enough space under the first apron to execute the same sign and trade that the Sacramento Kings did. I've crunched the numbers. It would have been really hard to do, but maybe you would have been a little bit more motivated to do it. Whereas even if they would have done all that stuff now, it would have been really hard to get to the point they needed to get to. Even if you dumped Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson, it still would have been really hard to still get DeMar DeRozan in a sign and trade and also fill out the roster while being hard capped at that first apron, because that's what happens when you do a sign and trade and acquire a player via sign and trade. So that's all the financials and all the complicated things. But Terry Rozier versus DeMar DeRozan, maybe that's kind of what the Heat ended up doing indirectly here. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think it's fair. I think they probably would have brought back Kyle had they not traded him. They probably would have brought him back on like a minimum salary, a veteran minimum contract, and that would have kind of cemented the deal.
There. So just that's a good point. Yeah.
So you're basically you traded away Kyle on a vetman, DeMar on a lower deal, perhaps, or maybe even that same sign and trade. And maybe Caleb? Is that kind of what you're theorizing there? That they might have had enough room to keep Caleb Martin?
Which we said when they traded for Terry Rozier in January, by the way, we got on the show and said, this probably means Caleb Martin is gone. And we were right.
So it's tough to swallow, and it's tough to kind of look at it from that perspective, because who knows what could have happened. But again, and I've said this, and I mean, maybe people are tired of hearing it or don't want to hear it in the first place. Like, the move made sense at the time because you were kind of sick of Kyle Lowry's shit, like you were kind of tired of him not producing out there, and the $30 million. It wasn't a fit, and it's like, you know what? There was grumpiness behind the scenes, and he wasn't available all the time, and when he wasn't doing anything, and so you kind of had to kind of cut bait a little bit, and that was, you know what, we're going to get a ball handler, we're going to get somebody, and the idea was, as many people want now, maximizing Jimmy's window. The idea was that Jimmy was going to be healthy, and he was going to just say, you know what, it's playoff time, now I'm engaged, and he was going to raise his game to another level. And now all of a sudden you've got a complimentary player in Terry Rozier that you didn't have in Kyle Lowry at any point over the last 2 seasons. And that might have been enough. You'll never know. We'll never know. But that was the goal. That was the plan. So I don't have any problem with Andy saying and confirming what we've talked about before, that was the idea, because it made sense at the time. It was, and I think a lot of people were content with the move, maybe even borderline happy with it, because at least it was something. It was addressing an obvious need, somebody that could drive the ball, put pressure on the rim, create offense for others. And when you look at what Terry was doing in Charlotte, which was never going to be directly replicated in Miami, it looked like a great deal at the time. My only concern was the inclusion of a first round pick, and that might have been, if you're looking at a snafu from the Heat front office in Elisburg, it's probably that inclusion of the pick, because it's taken you out of other moves this summer and down the road as well. And looking at how Miami is building through the draft and adding young players for that next era of Heat basketball, it does come back and bite them in the ass a little bit.
That's a really good point, right? It's the flexibility to add DeMar DeRozan, but also the flexibility that one other pick provides you. And the pick that they traded to Charlotte is protected, so it actually locks up a couple of picks for them that they can't move. So, it's a really good point, right? Like, would the Heat have been in a better position had they had that extra draft capital, if they were able to actually trade 3 first-round picks instead of 1 right now, and also went out and signed DeMar DeRozan? In a vacuum, DeMar DeRozan is a better player than Terry Rozier, and there's no question about that. No question. I would say, though, that Terry Rozier might be a better fit on this roster than DeMar DeRozan is.
I'd agree.
Right? And so you take Terry Rozier off this roster, and it feels like they would still have a playmaking deficit, right? Whether or not you have a true point guard or a fake one or this one or that one, you still need guys who can dribble the ball at a high level. And Tyler Hero is an elite shooter. He is not an elite playmaker with the ball in his hands, right? He doesn't have a great escape dribble. He can get trapped because of his size and all these things. Terry Rozier is just a better playmaker with the ball in his hands. If you got rid of him, I think you'd be at a deficit with that specific skill set, right? And the thing about Kyle Lowry is he could get the ball up the court, man. Like that guy can get the ball up the court, and it's an underrated skill. So DeMar DeRozan can obviously have done a little bit of that. If you had another first-round pick, would there have been another guard out there? Could you have also maybe gone out and gotten a Tyus Jones and maybe had done that instead of, or in addition to DeMar DeRozan? Like, depending if you were able to use these first-round picks and salary dump this and salary dump whatever it would have been, like, you just would have had more flexibility, and maybe you would have an opportunity to address that need somewhere else. So it's a really interesting what if, but I also say this. You and I talk to people around the league all the time. Nobody thought DeMar DeRozan was leaving this summer in January when the Heat made this deal. Everybody thought that the Bulls were going to stick to their guns, that DeMar DeRozan had a cushed gig as the star in Chicago in a big market for a team that was at least in the playoff mix every year. It's not like he played for the Pistons. You know what I mean? Like, you could he had that. And everybody thought the relationship was great. And finally, the Bulls decided to pull the plug on this thing. But nobody thought that was happening before the trade deadline, when teams were asking about DeMar DeRozan and were getting flat out told, we are not trading him.
Yeah.
So if the Heat even tried, and I'm not reporting that they did, but if they called Chicago and said, what's up with DeMar DeRozan, and they got the door slammed in their face, or that's not how phones work, but you know what I mean. Who would blame them for being like, well, that guy's never leaving Chicago. The Bulls are never going to let them go. They're probably going to max him out. They'll probably give him $35 million a year this summer, So I don't know. It's an interesting what if, but a what if is all. I don't know how much blame you can actually put on the front office, especially like you said earlier, and it's the right point. Fans have been clamoring for these exact kind of moves. It's enough with the star trades. Just improve the supporting cast around Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Get better. And that's what they did by getting Terry Rozier, and then it was the year from hell in terms of injuries. And then next thing you know, Terry Rozier's in a neck brace. So that's what ends up happening.
He's
all right.
back. He's back. He's feeling good.
He's back. He's feeling good. I'm excited to watch him. Which free agent moves were influenced mostly by Eric Spoelstra that actually did happen? We'll tell you the 2 players that he vouched for this summer after this. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let us know in the comments section whether or not the Heat made the right move by trading for Terry Rozier and punting on this offseason the way that they did. Also, make sure you listen to us and follow us on your favorite podcast app. So, not only did Andy Elisburg do that interview with SiriusXM, he was making the media rounds in Las Vegas, spoke with the beat guys on the ground over the weekend, and discuss some of the other offseason moves that the Heat made. And one thing he said, and I found this really interesting, that Eric Spoelstra helped push to bring back Thomas Bryant and was involved in the decision to offer a veteran minimum to Alec Burks. Now, it's been established, and we've been talking about this for a few years now. Eric Spoelstra is not just the head coach of the Miami Heat, right? He has long been sort of in that group in the front office. He is Miami Heat top brass. He is talking with Andy Elisburg, Adam Simon, Pat Riley, all these guys all the time about what kind of moves they can make and about the roster. Eric Spoelstra has influence and has a say-so over what happens. And now that he's signed that 8-year extension, more. He's got more. Now, whether or not he wanted to push for DeMar DeRozan or something like that, I don't know. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But among the things that actually happened, Andy Elisburg kind of mentioning Eric Spoelstra by name. He's the one that wanted to bring back Thomas Bryant. He liked Alec Burks. And he wasn't like deflecting. He was like, we all agreed on this, and everybody should be excited about it because Eric Spoelstra wanted these guys here. We'll start with Thomas Bryant, though, because the big thing there was re-signing Thomas Bryant and then waiving Orlando Robinson. So essentially choosing Thomas Bryant over Orlando Robinson. Are you surprised that Eric Spoelstra was maybe the leader making that decision?
Before we get into that, what you said at the end of last segment about slamming the door and how phones don't work that way. Like, how long before the phrase "hang up the phone" is kind of dialed out? That's just another thing dialed out of our lexicon.
So what would you just he left me unread?
Like,
is that the
I don't even know.
Is that the
like
Gen Z version of this?
How do you hang up a phone? Like nobody nobody actually puts a phone down. Like press the button.
Actually hang. Yeah, you push the button. He pressed the button on me. See, it doesn't work.
Yeah. You push the phone off. You push the phone on. It doesn't make any sense. Like it's got to be.
We still call it a hang up, but there are a few things sort of in our language that are like apparently broadcast
holdovers
and pod. Like even the like a podcast. What we do. There's no. It's derived from broadcast, which was derived from radio. It had nothing to do with television, and we call television programs broadcast. And now a podcast. Nobody knows where the term cast comes from or what broadcast even really means. We could just call it computer or phone sounding. We make a phone sound is essentially what you and I do here, but we don't. We do a podcast because it's a professional outfit that we have going on here. So, to your point.
Oh, you might not know it by this kind of segue here, although I think it's important to kind of get into it. The Thomas Bryant decision, to get back to that, honestly, like that's kind of a head scratcher because we've heard now that there was a financial benefit for the Heat and asking him to opt out and then kind of giving him the nudge, wink, wink that we would kind of re-sign you and that you wouldn't wind up losing any money anyway. If that was Thomas's plan in the first place, like who knows? Maybe he never explored other opportunities. We thought, Thomas Bryant, still young, still has size, still has 3-point potential. Like there might have been a market for him somewhere, but seeing how like everything dried up so quickly, especially for guys on the lower rungs of the NBA ladder, maybe he knew, or maybe his agent knew well in advance. Look, you know what? There's not going to be a lot of money out there.
Or maybe it was both. Opt in. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was opt out. Hey, see what other opportunities are out there for you because you know where you stand in our locker room. You're going to be the third center or the second, or the fourth center, whatever you might be.
Yeah.
Go out there and get that. And if you can't find that opportunity elsewhere, we'll have you back.
I'll take care of you.
So
Spo's
maybe that was
influence there, though. Yeah, Spo's influence though is a head scratching thing to me because like he's talked well of Thomas. Like he's talked about him being a veteran, a guy that does the work and everything else like that. And yet he's hardly ever gotten consistent playing time. Like in that 1 year there, despite all the injuries, despite Orlando Robinson not being able to stand out. And despite Kevin Love being older and not really dominating in any one aspect other than his rebounding and overall presence, like it's just kind of strange to me to hear that Spo was so firmly in TB's corner, given how you might see their relationship or their lack of playing time being maybe it's a fractious relationship, but I guess it's much more positive than you would have expected to. So I don't know. Maybe that speaks well about how they kind of view TB moving forward in the season. Like we've talked about it before. It might be evolving to the point where Kevin goes more towards a power forward, his former role, and with Bam kind of doing that as well. And now you've got Khalil Ware and TB as your kind of centers or sorts. Like maybe that's eventually making that transition. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I'm I'm still flummoxed by it, as I think a lot of Heat fans are.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Spoelstra always liked Thomas Bryant. You mentioned like he spoke highly of Thomas Bryant, and you could kind of, as reporters, you can kind of read between the lines. You're like, okay, what's real, what's fake, what's just lip service, and what's not. No, he liked. And by the way, Thomas Bryant was well liked in the locker room. He was one of the best guys on the bench. He was always talking. These are things that get coaches' attention, and it's not so black and white. And I think people say, like you were talking about before, well, if he doesn't play, the coach must hate him. He must be in the doghouse. No, sometimes he just doesn't play. You can only play a certain amount of guys. Not everybody gets to play. And when you have a guy on the bench who is still active, still engaged with the team, despite getting the DNP-CDs, that's what you need those guys as a coach, because you're not going to be able to play all 14 or 15 guys. You just can't. So if the guy who's not playing is still acting that way and making some sort of positive contribution, even just on the bench as a teammate, you need guys like that on the team. You literally need guys that are good not playing. Which doesn't sound right, but it's true. You need those guys. So,
absolutely.
And I'm not saying Orlando Robinson wasn't that. That has nothing to do with it. I just know that Thomas Bryant definitely was that. And to your point also, the three-point shooting is important. You can argue now, if Bam is going to be a quote-unquote power forward, that Miami's three centers, if we're going to call them Khalil Ware, Kevin Love, and Thomas Bryant, they can all space the floor to a different degree, right? And so maybe that's where Eric Spoelstra wants to guide this offense and this defense going forward is, hey, we need guys with size and guys who could space the floor, and we want to pair them with Bam Adebayo a little bit more. And Thomas Bryant, no doubt, is more proven in that regard than Orlando Robinson is. And yeah, I don't find it all that surprising. By the way, just because they kind of like Thomas Bryant doesn't mean that they wouldn't have rather had a Goga Batadze or a Mo Wagner or an Andre Drummond. But all these guys are getting $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year. Miami only had these veteran minimums to work out. So it's like, okay, this is our favorite center in the league available to us right now at a minimum, right? It's not as black and white as people think. In terms of the Alec Burks part of this. So Elisburg said that Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra have always kind of looked at Alec Burks, who's been in the league for a million years, as a guy that they thought would fit with this team. As a guy like, hey, that's a guy that we kind of like. And that's what Elisburg essentially said. Not all of that surprising, considering how long Alec Burks has been in the league, and that I do think when you're just filling out a roster, you want guys who just do a thing. You're like, all right, I know what that guy does. He's not going to be our star, right? This isn't the DeMar DeRozan thing that didn't happen. This isn't maybe us swinging and missing on Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard. It's not that. But I know that I can get Alec Burks, and I know that he does a thing, and that thing has kept him in the league for a very long time. And I think that's all it was.
Yeah. If like 5 years ago, had they been in the same spot, Jordan Crawford, you are now a Miami Heat, that kind of thing. Like, it's like sometimes you just, or Lou Will, somebody like that. Like sometimes you just need that guy who's a good locker room dude, well-liked, etc. And just a guy that you can trust to be your scorer off the bench. It makes sense. Like he does seem to tick a lot of the boxes that Miami would put a premium on.
6'6". He's got some size. Could basically play three different positions. Has played 1, 2, and 3 throughout his career. Again, the Heat don't necessarily put a premium on what position guys play, but that actually works for Alec Burks. That kind of fits what he does. He does try defensively, although he's not great. Doesn't move laterally as much as you want. But again, I don't even know if he's going to play every night. I have no idea what his role is going to be. So, but
we know he's accepted that role in the past. To your point before about TB, like we know that with Alec Burks, he's not going to grumble. He's going to be, hey, you know what? I'm happy to be in the league. I'm going to put up my 15 every once in a while. I'm going to cash my check. I'm going to get my pension. I'm good.
Had some moments in the playoffs for the Knicks over the Pacers. Now, all those moments were in garbage time in games that didn't really matter, which kind of gets lost every time I hear people, oh, he scored 20 points in a playoff game. And like that,
you know that
was over. Like, but whatever. I like Alec Burks. I covered him in Golden State when he was there for half a season. Then he got traded to Brooklyn, I think it was, or somewhere. I think he makes sense as a guy that Eric Spoelstra would like in very much the same way that he likes Thomas Bryant. He's going to walk in, he's going to be professional, he's going to cash his checks, and when I need him, we were the 21st ranked offense last year. Theoretically, he can help us, in moments over the course of the season. And by the way, you need guys like Alec Burks on your roster for an 82-game season. And I would argue the Heat have not had enough of those guys over the last few years where, you don't need them to win a playoff game, but in a game in January or December when guys are hurt guys are tired or not engaged or just not feeling it in the dog days, You you dust off Alec Burks and throw him out there for 30 minutes and say, tonight's your night, dude. Go for it.
Yeah.
Be the superstar you want to be. And Alec Burks will go out there and score. He could score you 30 games, 30 points in a game, right?
I am
They
looking
haven't had
forward
enough
to
of
that
those guys.
second night of a back-to-back right
Yeah.
before the All-Star break when everybody's just like, oh, just kill us now. We're so tired. We're just looking forward to a trip to San Francisco or just to kind of take a trip to the Caribbean or whatever. And it's like Alec Burks goes out there against, I don't know, Utah or something like that. One of those vicious
former
Utah,
team.
Denver back-to-backs. Yeah. It just goes off for 25, 30. And we're like, the Alec Burks game. We finally got it. It's going to be exciting.
Let's just make a promise now. When the Alec Burks game happens, and by the way, he could uncork like 2 or 3 of those over the course of the season. We don't know. All 10 credit cookies go to Alec Burks. We'll officially call it the Alec Burks game, and we'll give him all 10 credit cookies. Nice. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app. Everydayers, you are not going to want to miss tomorrow's episode. We'll be joined by Heat two-way player Keishad Johnson for an exclusive interview. He joins us for the duration or for most of the show, and we already recorded it, and it's a great conversation. You're not going to want to miss it. But for now, that'll do it for us today.